war, the U.S. reached a grim and bloody milestone this weekend. The deaths of 4 U.S. servicemen in a roadside bombing on Sunday pushed the American casualty death toll to 4,000 Americans dead. Is the surge working, both militarily and politically, or either one? I'm joined by 2 Iraq war vets. Pete Hegseth is the executive director of Vets for Freedom, and he recently made a return trip to Baghdad, where he had served with the 101st Airborne in 2005. And Jon Soltz is co-founder and chairman of the VoteVets.org. I want to ask you both to comment on something that just came out from John McCain. There was a lot of talk about whether John McCain, who is the Republican nominee for president and a military man through and through, if he is clear as to who our enemy is over there. He said that the al-Qaeda organization which attacked us on 9/11 is our primary enemy over there, and that they're being trained in Iran. Is that correct, Pete? Is that fact correct?
Listen, al-Qaeda in Iraq has received weapons from Iran, so let's not mince words here. Iran clearly wants al-Qaeda to have a level of success to ensure Iraq is not stable. But, you know, John McCain's been to Iraq 8 times, and Hillary Clinton's been twice, and Barack Obama once. If anybody understands the nature of the enemy in Iraq, it's John McCain. He has led the charge on this surge.
And who's training them? Who is the enemy and who's supporting them? Who are we up against over there?
We're up against
fighters.
2 distinct
Who are
enemies.
they fighting?
Foreign fighters in al-Qaeda and Iraqi Sunni insurgents, and we're also rogue Iranian-backed militias. So we've got 2 distinct enemies that we're fighting. We've been taking them on, both of them on simultaneously, with great success against al-Qaeda. Attacks are down over 90% throughout in Baghdad, and sectarian violence is down over 90% throughout the country. So the surge has been incredibly successful because we're taking on our enemies, and I believe we know who they are and taking them out.
John, who are our enemies over there?
Well, we have a lot of enemies right now. Obviously, you have Shia on Shia violence, you have Shia on Iraqi, or Shia on Sunni violence, you have Shia on American violence. So, look, I mean, the key issue
How much would be going on if we weren't there? Who would be fighting with who if we weren't there?
Well, obviously, you'd have Shia on Shia violence and Shia on Sunni violence, which is the core issue here. Senator McCain's statement was, like, absolutely ridiculous, and I'm surprised that Pete would defend it. The Shia militias that operate in Iraq, the Mahdi Army and the Scary Militia, those not only are they supported by Iran, but the Scary Militia was in Iran during the Saddam Hussein years. The key Shia cleric in Iraq, Ali Sistani, is also Iranian. So for Senator McCain to make those statements, I just don't know how he could try to be commander-in-chief.
Let's watch Pete and John. Let's watch what Senator McCain said, because it has caused a stir.
As you know, there are al-Qaeda operatives that are taken back into Iran, given training as leaders, and they're moving back into Iraq. I think Americans should be very angry when we know that Iran is exporting weapons into Iraq that kill Americans.
You know, it's so complicated, Pete. Let me ask you to explain it one more time. We went into Iraq to topple a government run by Sunnis. We found, having gone in there, that the al-Qaeda organization took advantage of the vacuum. They moved in there, too. We're now facing al-Qaeda in Mesopotamia. We're also fighting the Shias. But the Shias are the government over there, the new government we've set up, and they are somewhat friendly to Iran. It's very hard for me to figure out what would be different if we left. Would these wars continue as if they are
Chris,
right now?
You can't say that all the Shia in Iraq is Shia in Iran. You've got Arab Shia in Iran. You've got Persian Arab Shia in Iraq, Persian Shia in Iran. They've been fighting each other for decades. So to say Shia equals Shia in Iraq and Iran is certifiably false. There's also a lot of evidence that Iran has sent weapons both to Shia militias and to al-Qaeda elements in Iraq. This is intelligence that has occurred.
Why should they stop fighting because we're there?
Fighters.
You say they've been fighting for decades. Why will they stop because we're there? I don't understand why they intend to stop. Do you think they intend to stop fighting over there?
Well, why has the violence, Chris, why has the violence gone down so dramatically?
No, because we got American soldiers in the field, of course. But when we leave, they'll continue the fight they had before we got there, won't they?
Listen, Iraq is very proud of its non-sectarian past. And you know what? If you talk to Iraqis on the street like I did 3 weeks ago, Sunnis don't hate Shia and Shia don't hate Sunnis. Iraq and Iran have al-Qaeda and Iran have exacerbated the violence by trying to hit each other's populations with suicide bombers and death squads. It is absolutely not the massive Sunnis and Shia going at each other. Okay. They want to live in peace, and we're taking out al-Qaeda and Iranian militias, and that's why the violence has come down so dramatically.
That's why the surge has been successful. revisionist history. When we invaded Iraq, we handed the country to Iran. We took away the Kurk. I mean, the bottom line here is that all of the EFPs that penetrate our Humvees, these are Shia weapons. These are coming from support of Iran.
They're Iranian weapons.
They're coming from the support of Iran. I don't think there's any question about it. But that's not Al-Qaeda. And for Senator McCain to somehow make that correlation between the two is absolutely ridiculous.
John,
let me ask you both for an estimate of the American casualties to come, the American costs to come. You first, Pete. Wars are meant to be won eventually. Eventually, we stabilize the situation, reduce it to some sort of police role, perhaps over there. When will it be down to, say, the level of violence in Korea, where we lose, perhaps on average, since 1953, 2 service people a year? We've lost none in Japan, none in Germany. When will it get down to simply a police role, where we'd basically be keeping the peace, not trying to make it? When will that happen?
We are much closer today than we were.
When would that be?
Listen, you've asked me this question before on the show, and I'm not going to give you a time because we can't.
Well, give me a decade, 100 years, 50 years?
People misconstrue McCain's comments, but clearly we're going to have a long-term
You just got back from over there. You're an expert. Tell me roughly how many decades, how many years, 5 years, 10 years, till we can actually say the war itself is over?
Oh, I think by 5 years we should have a great indication of whether or not the Iraqis have stood up enough to defend their own country, and they're already doing that. They've had a surge of over 200,000 Iraqis that have joined the security forces in the last 14 months. That is an incredible. They've really stood up as we've given them the opportunity, and it would be a huge mistake for us not to stand alongside our Iraqi allies as they fight al-Qaeda
Would you stay any longer than 5 years?
Militias.
Would you continue a war that lasted another 5 years, beyond another 5 years? Let me ask how far you would keep the commitment.
If we're not using the right strategy,
how far would you keep a war going over there?
Chris, if we're not using the right strategy, then we should bring them home. But we're employing the right strategy, and it's being successful. And it doesn't make any sense to go back to strategies that were failing. And you know what? John and others use 2006 talking points. They talk about the Civil War. Civil War's over. They talk about Al-Qaeda not being there.
Let's talk about 2008 talking points
Al-Qaeda's there now.
When do you think? Do you think the United States can get out of there with no major losses to us? Are we smart to get out of there?
Look, America needs to get out of there because the McCain-Bush policy is a policy of retreat against Osama bin Laden and the people that attacked our country on 9/11. You have 90% of your army stuck in Iraq. If you had put the surge brigades in Afghanistan, you would have doubled your force structure on the ground in Afghanistan.
So it's better to fight off Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan?
Absolutely. It's better to fight them where they attacked our country.
We'll continue this. Jon Soltz, thank you, gentlemen, for serving your country. I mean that.